Subutai, the forgotten general who conquered half the world. Part 1. The boy who changed the art of war. Alexander inherited a kingdom. Napoleon inherited a revolution. One of history's greatest military minds inherited almost nothing. History has a curious habit of remembering rulers while forgetting the men who made their victories possible. Almost everyone recognizes the names Alexander the Great, Napoleon Bonaparte, and Genghis Khan. Far fewer know Subutai, the quiet strategist, who helped build the largest contiguous land empire in human history. He never wore a crown. He never founded a dynasty. He never claimed the glory reserved for kings. Instead, he spent more than 40 years serving Genghis Khan and his successor Ögedei, helping direct campaigns that stretched from northern China to the plains of Hungary. Military historians frequently rank Subutai among history's greatest commanders, not because he won a single famous battle, but because he transformed the way campaigns were planned. His armies crossed deserts, mountain ranges, frozen rivers, and entire continents. They defeated kingdoms that had never imagined they could be reached, let alone conquered. During his career, he campaigned against more than 30 kingdoms, tribal confederations, and states, across territory that today spans over 20 modern countries. Yet outside military history, his name remains surprisingly unfamiliar. How could one of history's greatest strategists become one of its best-kept secrets? To answer that question, we must begin not with an empire, but with a boy born on the lonely grasslands of Mongolia. A boy from the edge of the steppe. Around 1175, near the upper reaches of Mongolia's Onon River, a boy was born into a family that no one expected would influence world history. His father, Jachigudai, is remembered in later sources as a blacksmith or skilled craftsman among the Uriankai people. Historians continue to debate the precise details of his occupation, but they agree on one important point. Subutai did not belong to the aristocratic Borjigin clan, from which Genghis Khan emerged. In most medieval societies, that fact alone would have determined his future. The Mongolian steppe followed different rules. Life there was relentlessly demanding. Bitter winters could wipe out entire herds. Summer droughts threatened survival. Children learned to ride almost as soon as they could walk. And every member of the family worked simply to endure another season. On the steppe, inherited privilege mattered far less than endurance, skill, and loyalty. Those lessons became Subutai's first education. His older brother Gelmi entered the service of a young tribal leader named Temujin. According to the secret history of the Mongols, Gelmi once saved Temujin's life after an arrow struck his neck, risking his own life by sucking blood from the wound to keep his leader alive. The act earned Temujin's lasting trust. Inspired by his brother, the young Subutai also entered Temujin's service. He was still little more than a teenager. Neither of them could have imagined that they were helping to build an empire that would one day stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe. The rise of an unlikely commander. The Mongolia of Subutai's youth was divided by rival tribes, shifting alliances, and generations of blood feuds. Temujin intended to change that. After years of warfare, diplomacy, and political skill, he united the tribes. In 1206, a great assembly proclaimed him Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. His greatest innovation, however, was not political. It was military. Instead of organizing armies by tribe, Genghis Khan reorganized them into decimal units: Arban 10 men, Zun 100, Mingan 1,000, and Tumen 10,000. Promotion depended increasingly on discipline, ability, and loyalty rather than noble birth. The reform transformed the lives of gifted men like Subutai. Across much of medieval Europe, command of an army usually belonged to princes and hereditary nobles. Within the Mongol system, however, an exceptionally talented commoner could rise to the highest levels of command. Subutai did exactly that. Within only a few years, the son of a craftsman had become one of Genghis Khan's most trusted military planners. His rank was not inherited, it was earned. Genghis Khan's dogs of war. Among Genghis Khan's most celebrated commanders were Jebi, Jelme, Kubilay, and Subutai, warriors remembered in the secret history of the Mongols as the Khan's fearsome four dogs of war. To modern readers, the title may sound insulting. To the Mongols, it was the highest praise. A hunting dog represented absolute loyalty, relentless endurance, and fearless determination. The famous passage describes these commanders with iron foreheads, chisel-like snouts, and swords for tongues, living weapons unleashed against the enemies of the empire. Each earned his reputation in a different way. Jebi became legendary for relentless pursuit, Jelme for unwavering loyalty, others for extraordinary courage in battle. Subutai stood apart for another reason. He could see an entire campaign before the first arrow was fired. The strategist begins to emerge. Most commanders prepared for battles. Subutai prepared for everything that came before, and everything that followed. He studied terrain, weather, distances, and the political relationships between neighboring peoples. He understood that a retreat might create a better opportunity than an immediate attack, and that dividing an enemy could be more effective than confronting one large army. To him, a battle was never an isolated event. It was one part of a much larger design. Centuries later, military historians would call this approach operational warfare, the art of linking multiple battles into a single coordinated campaign. Subutai was practicing it long before the concept had a name. Soon, he would have an opportunity to demonstrate just how powerful that way of thinking could be. The kingdoms beyond the Mongolian steppe were about to discover that they were facing not merely a brilliant cavalry commander, but one of history's greatest military architects.
Part 2. The general who made empires tremble. Talent had opened the door. Now the world would discover what Subutai could do with it. Over the next 4 decades, he would help lead campaigns across thousands of miles, fighting enemies from northern China to Eastern Europe. Few commanders in history have operated over such enormous distances, or against such a wide variety of opponents. By the end of his career, his campaigns had reached territory spanning more than 5,000 miles from Mongolia to Hungary. His greatest victories were not won through larger armies. They were won through better planning. Chasing an empire across Asia. History's greatest campaigns sometimes begin with a single mistake. In 1218, a Mongol trade caravan entered the Khwarezma Empire, one of the wealthiest states in the Islamic world. The governor of Otrar accused the merchants of espionage and executed them. Hoping to avoid war, Genghis Khan demanded justice. Instead, the Khwarezma Shah made a fatal decision. He executed the Mongol ambassadors. Among the Mongols, ambassadors were considered inviolable. Their murder was not merely an insult, it demanded retribution. The response was swift. Within a few years, the Khwarezma Empire collapsed beneath the Mongol invasion. Yet one of the campaign's most remarkable episodes began after the empire had already fallen. Its ruler, Shah Muhammad II, fled westward. Genghis Khan turned to 2 trusted commanders, Jebi, Subutai. Their instructions were brief. Find him. Neither asked how far they might have to ride. Together they crossed deserts, climbed the Caucasus Mountains, rode around the Caspian Sea, and entered lands no Mongol army had previously explored. Along the way they defeated Persians, Georgians, Alans, Cumans, and numerous smaller powers that attempted to stop them. The Shah eventually died while still in flight. But the mission had become something far greater than a pursuit. As they rode, Subutai observed roads, mountain passes, rivers, political alliances, and the strengths and weaknesses of every region they crossed. Years later, when Mongol armies invaded Eastern Europe, they were not marching into unfamiliar territory. Subutai had already prepared the map. The general who fought with information. Most medieval commanders gathered intelligence. Subutai built campaigns around it. Information, in his view, was not merely useful. It was a weapon. Scouts explored roads, rivers, grazing lands, and supply routes long before the main army arrived. That knowledge allowed him to think beyond individual engagements. Rather than pursuing one victory after another, he coordinated separate movements into a single strategic design. Subutai practiced it long before it had name. Unlike commanders who sought personal glory in the front ranks, he often directed operations from positions where he could oversee the entire campaign, synchronizing distant columns through mounted couriers and carefully timed orders. He fought with cavalry when necessary, but he fought with information first. 9 days that changed history. In 1223, the princes of Kievan Rus joined their Cuman allies to destroy what they believed was a retreating Mongol army. On paper, they held the advantage. Subutai saw something different. Instead of fighting, he withdrew. 1 day passed, then another, then another. For 9 days, the Mongols appeared to flee across the open steppe. The Rus princes grew increasingly confident. Victory, they believed, was only a matter of time. But with every mile they advanced, their coalition stretched farther apart. Communication weakened. Each prince hurried ahead, eager to claim the honor of defeating the Mongols first. Subutai had no intention of escaping. He was arranging the battlefield. When the exhausted coalition reached the Kalka River, the Mongols suddenly turned. The retreat ended. The trap closed. Separated from one another, the Allied armies were defeated in detail. Before they could regroup, military historians still study the Battle of Kalka River, because it demonstrated one of Subutai's greatest insights. Destroy an enemy's coordination, and victory often follows. The army that never stopped moving. European chroniclers struggled to explain how Mongol armies seemed to appear everywhere at once. The answer lay not in numbers, but in mobility. A typical Mongol cavalryman traveled with 3 to 5 remount horses, changing mounts throughout the day rather than exhausting a single animal. These hardy Mongolian ponies survived by grazing as they marched and required little grain, freeing the army from the heavy supply trains that slowed most medieval forces. While many European armies advanced 10 to 15 miles in a day, Mongol forces could often cover 60 to 80 miles, then arrive ready to fight. Scouts, engineers, and couriers supported a military machine designed for continuous movement. Orders and information traveled quickly, allowing Mongol commanders to react faster than almost any opponent. Subutai understood a timeless military truth. The army that moves faster usually thinks faster. By the time an enemy realized where the Mongols were, Subutai was already planning his next move. The campaign that shocked Europe. Nearly 20 years after Kalka River, Subutai reached the height of his career. Genghis Khan was dead. His son Ogedei Khan now ruled the empire. Many expected the great conquests to slow. Instead, Subutai helped plan the boldest campaign of his life. Europe. His objective was not simply to defeat European armies. It was to prevent them from becoming one army. Instead of advancing in a single column, the Mongols invaded along several independent routes. One force entered Poland under Baidar and Kaidan. Another advanced into Hungary under Batu Khan, with Subutai directing the campaign. Additional forces secured the flanks and protected communications. To European rulers, these appeared to be separate invasions. They were not. They were parts of one carefully coordinated operation. On April 9, 1241, the Northern Army defeated Duke Henry II of Silesia at the Battle of Legnica, preventing Polish and Bohemian forces from joining Hungary's defense. Only 2 days later, on April 11, Subutai struck the main objective at Mohi. The two battlefields lay more than 500 miles apart, separated by the formidable Carpathian Mountains. Coordinating victories across such distances, and across one of Europe's greatest natural barriers, within 48 hours, remains one of the most remarkable operational achievements of the Middle Ages. There were no telegraphs, no railroads, no radios, only disciplined planning, mounted couriers, trusted commanders, and one extraordinary strategist who could see an entire continent as a single battlefield. Europe believed it was facing several Mongol armies. In reality, it was facing a single mind. That mind belonged to Subutai.
The Part 3. The Legacy of a Forgotten Genius. The victories at Legnica and Mohi stunned Europe. Within 48 hours, two major Christian armies had been destroyed on opposite sides of the Carpathian Mountains. Kings, bishops, and chroniclers struggled to understand how an enemy from the distant Asian steppe could strike with such speed and coordination. For many Europeans, the Mongols seemed unstoppable. They had not yet realized that the driving force behind the campaign was not simply a powerful army. It was a commander who had spent decades learning how to think farther than his enemies. The Battle of Mohi. On April 11, 1241, King Bela IV of Hungary believed he held a strong defensive position behind the Sajo River. The main bridge was heavily guarded. If the Mongols attempted to cross, they would have to force their way through a narrow bottleneck against prepared defenders. Subutai had no intention of fighting the battle his opponent expected. Before dawn, Mongol troops attacked the bridge, drawing the Hungarian army's attention. While the defenders rushed to meet the assault, another Mongol force quietly crossed the river downstream, using a hastily constructed bridge. By sunrise, Hungarian soldiers found enemy cavalry appearing from an entirely unexpected direction. The carefully planned defense began to unravel. Chinese engineers accompanying the Mongol army reportedly deployed traction trebuchets and other siege engines to bombard the bridgehead, providing covering fire as troops forced the crossing. Although historians continue to debate the exact details, Mohi represents one of the earliest well-documented examples of siege technology being adapted to support a major battlefield river crossing in Europe rather than a conventional siege. Caught between converging attacks, the Hungarian army collapsed into confusion. Thousands were killed. King Bela escaped only by fleeing westward. The Battle of Mohi shattered Hungary's military power and opened the road into Central Europe. Yet to Subutai, it was never an isolated victory. It was the successful conclusion of a campaign that had unfolded across an entire continent. One campaign, two battlefields. Modern maps make Subutai's achievement easier to appreciate. Legnica and Mohi were separated by more than 500 miles, and the towering barrier of the Carpathian Mountains. Yet the two victories occurred only 48 hours apart. That timing was no accident. The Northern Army prevented Polish and Bohemian forces from reinforcing Hungary. At almost the same moment, the main Mongol army destroyed Hungary's field army at Mohi. Europe believed it was witnessing two invasions. Subutai had planned one campaign. Even today, military historians regard the coordination of these operations as one of the finest examples of medieval operational planning. Why did the Mongols turn back? One of history's most enduring questions follows naturally. If the Mongols had defeated Europe's strongest armies, why did they stop? The traditional explanation centers on the death of Ögedei Khan in late 1241. As one of the empire's senior commanders, Batu Khan faced growing political pressure to return east for the Kurultai, the assembly that would eventually choose the next great Khan. Most historians consider this an important reason for the withdrawal, but probably not the only one. Recent environmental studies suggest that the exceptionally wet spring of 1242 turned much of the Hungarian plain into marshland, reducing the grazing that sustained the Mongols' thousands of remount horses. Their extraordinary mobility, the foundation of every successful campaign, became more difficult to maintain. Other scholars point to Western Europe's growing network of stone castles and fortified cities. Unlike the open grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, these fortifications favored long sieges over rapid maneuver, forcing the Mongols to fight a very different kind of war. Today, most historians view the withdrawal as the result of several overlapping political, environmental, and military factors. History rarely turns on a single decision. The price of victory. Admiring Subutai's military brilliance should never require ignoring the suffering his campaigns caused. The Mongol conquest transformed Eurasia, but they also devastated it. Cities were destroyed. Entire communities disappeared. Millions of lives were disrupted by wars they neither chose nor controlled. Persian historian Rashid al-Din described prosperous regions left in ruins, while European chroniclers recorded the fear that spread ahead of the Mongol advance. The English monk Matthew Paris portrayed the invaders in apocalyptic language, reflecting the terror that gripped Christendom long before most Europeans had ever seen a Mongol soldier. Military genius and human tragedy can exist side by side. Understanding Subutai requires acknowledging both. The quiet years. After the European campaign, Subutai gradually withdrew from active service. By then, he was approaching 70 years of age, an extraordinary lifespan for a commander who had spent more than 4 decades on horseback. Although no longer leading great expeditions, he remained one of the empire's most respected senior commanders and advisors during the final years of his life. Subutai died in 1248, probably at about 73 years of age. Most historians believe he died in Mongolia, although the exact location has been lost to history. No confirmed tomb has ever been identified. For a man who had helped reshape Eurasia, his final years passed in remarkable quiet. Why history forgot him. History naturally remembers rulers. Alexander became king. Napoleon became emperor. Genghis Khan founded an empire. Subutai did none of these things. He spent his entire career serving another man's vision. His victories belonged to the Mongol Empire rather than to himself. Time did the rest. Many Mongol records disappeared. European historians concentrated on their own kings and kingdoms. Above all, the towering reputation of Genghis Khan overshadowed nearly everyone around him. Yet among military professionals, Subutai has never truly been forgotten. His campaigns continue to be studied because they demonstrate timeless principles of planning, mobility, deception, logistics, and command, principles that remain relevant long after horses gave way to tanks and satellites. A legacy written across continents. Subutai fought in campaigns for more than 40 years. He helped conquer or subdue more than 30 kingdoms, tribal confederations, and states across Asia and Europe. His armies crossed thousands of miles, reshaping the political map of Eurasia. Yet his greatest achievement cannot be measured by territory alone. He changed the way wars were planned. He demonstrated that intelligence could be as decisive as courage, that logistics could be as important as battlefield valor, that armies separated by hundreds of miles could fight as one. 8 centuries later, those lessons still appear in military classrooms around the world. Perhaps that is the greatest irony of all. Alexander inherited a kingdom. Napoleon inherited a revolution. Subutai inherited almost nothing. Yet the son of a humble craftsman helped build the largest contiguous land empire in history and transformed the art of war. History remembers the rulers who stood in the sunlight, but sometimes the person who changes the world is the one standing quietly behind them. That person was Subutai.
It's time to study new words in context. 1. Contiguous. Definition: connected without any break, sharing a common border. Example: the Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous land empire in history. 2. Relentlessly. Definition: in a way that never stops or gives up. Example: the soldiers relentlessly marched across the steppe. 3. Hereditary. Definition: passed from parents or family members, especially power or position. Example: in many countries, kings had hereditary power. 4. Snouts. Definition: the long front part of an animal's face, including the nose and mouth. Example: wolves use their snouts to smell food. 5. Unleashed. Definition: released with great force or allowed to begin. Example: the king unleashed his army against the enemy. 6. Unwavering. Definition: strong and steady, never changing. Example: she showed unwavering loyalty to her friends. 7. Inviolable. Definition: so important or respected that no one should harm or break it. Example: the safety of ambassadors was considered inviolable. 8. Retribution. Definition: punishment for a wrong action. Example: the attack brought swift retribution from the enemy. 9. Remount. Definition: a fresh horse used to replace a tired one during a journey. Example: each rider had several remount horses. 10. Mounted couriers. Definition: messengers who carried messages while riding horses. Example: mounted couriers delivered orders across the empire. 11. Chroniclers. Definition: people who write down important events in history. Example: medieval chroniclers recorded the Mongol invasions. 12. Bottleneck. Definition: a narrow place where people or things cannot move easily. Example: the bridge became a bottleneck during the battle. 13. Hastily. Definition: quickly and without much time to prepare. Example: the soldiers hastily built a bridge. 14. Unravel. Definition: to begin to fail or fall apart. Example: the enemy's defense began to unravel. 15. Traction trebuchets. Definition: large war machines powered by people pulling ropes to throw heavy stones. Example: the army used traction trebuchets to throw rocks across the river. 16. Converging. Definition: moving toward the same place from different directions. Example: two armies were converging on the battlefield. 17. Marshland. Definition: wet land with soft ground and shallow water. Example: the horses moved slowly through the marshland. 18. Prosperous. Definition: rich, successful, and doing well. Example: the city became prosperous because of trade. 19. Apocalyptic. Definition: looking or feeling like the end of the world. Example: the people described the invasion in apocalyptic language. 20. Gripped. Definition: held strongly or filled completely with a feeling. Example: fear gripped the people after the invasion.
Comprehension questions. 1. Why is Subutai less well known than Alexander, Napoleon, or Genghis Khan? Answer: because he was a military commander, not a king or emperor. He served the Mongol Empire instead of ruling it himself. 2. What kind of family was Subutai born into? Answer: he was born into the family of a blacksmith or skilled craftsman and did not belong to a noble family. 3. Why did the Mongol system help Subutai rise to a high position? Answer: because the Mongols often promoted people based on ability, loyalty, and skill instead of family background. 4. What was special about Genghis Khan's military organization? Answer: he organized his army into groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 soldiers, making the army more disciplined and effective. 5. Why was Subutai different from many other commanders of his time? Answer: he planned entire campaigns instead of thinking only about a single battle. 6. What event started the war between the Mongols and the Khwarezm Empire? Answer: the Khwarezm governor killed Mongol merchants, and later the Shah executed Mongol ambassadors. 7. What did Subutai learn while chasing Shah Muhammad across Asia? Answer: he learned about the land, roads, rivers, mountain passes, and the strengths and weaknesses of different regions. 8. Why did Subutai believe that information was a weapon? Answer: because good information helped him understand the enemy and make better plans before the fighting even began. 9. How did Subutai defeat the Rus princes at the Battle of Kalka River? Answer: he pretended to retreat for 9 days, drew the enemy apart, and then attacked when they were separated. 10. Why could the Mongol army travel much faster than most European armies? Answer: Because each rider had several horses, the horses grazed while traveling, and the army did not need heavy supply trains. 11. What was remarkable about the battles of Legnica and Mohi? Answer. The two battles took place more than 500 miles apart, yet the Mongols won both within 2 days as part of one coordinated campaign. 12. How did Subutai surprise the Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohi? Answer. He attacked the main bridge, while another force secretly crossed the river at a different place and attacked from another direction. 13. Why did the Mongols withdraw from Europe after their victories? Answer. Historians believe several reasons were involved, including the death of Ogedei Khan, difficult weather, and Europe's stronger stone castles. 14. How did Subutai spend the final years of his life? Answer. He retired from active campaigning, remained a respected advisor, and died in Mongolia, around the age of 73. 15. What is Subutai's greatest legacy? Answer. He changed the way military campaigns were planned by combining intelligence, speed, logistics, and coordinated operations over great distances. 16. Why do you think history remembers rulers like Genghis Khan better than commanders like Subutai? Answer. History often remembers kings and emperors because they ruled countries. However, commanders like Subutai also changed history through their ideas, planning, and leadership, even if they did not rule an empire themselves.